Hi guys, how's it going? Chudmunder here. So today I wanted to talk about nightclubs, specifically kind of my experience with them, what I've kind of learned over the years of going since I was younger, what I've observed, what's kind of annoyed me a little bit, some other things I've learned. That's kind of what I wanted to go through. And the reason I kind of make this video is because it's kind of obviously it's somewhere that I somewhat frequent. Both in London and around the world as well. I wouldn't say I frequent them as much as I used to. That was way too much. So I'm kind of gonna go through kind of what I liked about it, what I enjoyed, what positive things I learned, and then we'll go into the kind of more darker kind of anecdotal side of it, which is what I didn't enjoy so much. And so first of all, I wanted to say that I really do enjoy going. Of course, it is obviously quite an expensive venture to do. You definitely can't go to these places every single day, and that's only gotten worse. So, for example, back when I started going, a drink with a mixer was what, £12-13. I mean, that was in London, in like the centre. Now you probably couldn't get that for less than 30, and 25. I mean, obviously that's adding on service and everything. But I started off with kind of going to members clubs. So these would be members clubs kind of, with a nightclub or without a nightclub. And of course the clientele there would be a bit more, I guess you could say upmarket. That was all well and good. The place is very nice. The food is absolutely amazing. The staff, by and large, treat you very, very nicely in these members clubs. They cost a fee. I mean, they cost a fee to go to. You can somewhat justify it, somewhat not justify it. If you're prepared to go regularly as a part of your leisure, then you can justify it more. But if you're just gonna get it that one time, just to go a couple times because it seemed good when you went with a friend, no, I wouldn't recommend doing that at all. You'll just be paying membership for essentially something that you're not using. But what I will say is I've had some incredible times there that I wouldn't really trade for anything. I've made some amazing friends who've kind of, taken me all over the world. I've kind of also kind of found myself a lot as well. I'd definitely say kind of it's not, I wouldn't want to say shape my personality in a kind of bad way, but it's definitely kind of made me grow as a person. You kind of meet different people from kind of different walks of life, different backgrounds, and you just kind of bounce off that really. And also one thing I've noticed is that it's ironically somewhere that you can kind of somewhat forget about your differences depending on the situation. But no, it's I've had some amazing times there. I'd say I really like it's definitely good to go once in a while. Anything more than that, you're going to be setting yourself up for issues. But I think definitely going once in a while with your friends is a really, really good thing to do. I would say that, of course, it's better to go with friends as well because it kind of splits the cost. It ends up being cheaper, literally. It ends up being cheaper, literally, and comparatively as well, compared to you just going with a very, very small group of friends. Of course, I'm not sure that girls can relate to this in the same way. Obviously there's lots of examples, like there's lots of exceptions to that. But as a boy, that's kind of what the situation is. So that's really good. I made some very, very good friends in management. I made some very, very good friends kind of just all around the world doing different things, different perspectives. I've had a lot of support from people that I've met. But I would say one thing is that my biggest mistake that I made when I went to these places is that I was a bit too I guess I would say I was a little bit more emotionally invested than I should have been. And I'm going to kind of explain this now. So essentially, kind of going back, kind of how I grew up in the school, like, boarding school that I went to and everything like that, you're kind of, I'm not saying no one else, I'm not saying this isn't the case for this is not the case for anyone else. Of course, a lot of other people have this as well, but kind of just coming from me, the background that I grew up in and the environments that I grew up in, you always have a certain level of respect for people. It doesn't matter if you disagree with them. It doesn't matter if we just have some natural differences. You just have a certain level of respect, and that's just that. So naturally, what ended up happening was, so of course you'd think that others would respect you back in that way as well. But no, what actually ends up happening is in a lot of these places, you get a lot of people who don't really see that in the same way. So essentially, you're giving a lot of respect and, you know, emotional debt to a lot of people who literally just, it's a water off a duck's back to them. And, you know, that's kind of, you know, you could argue, okay, fine, you shouldn't really be doing that anyway, and that's true. So I think as a kind of naive teenager, kind of early 20-year-old, that's kind of, I think I would say I definitely took that maybe a little bit of a step too far. But then you kind of have to understand that when it can also become apparent that certain people that you meet, and this is true for life as well, this isn't just in the nightclub, but of course in the nightclub it would naturally going to be a bit more pronounced, at least in my experience, is that some people are just going to be your friends for the evening. So not really friends per se. So, you know, the only time that they'll be interested in speaking to you is on Saturday evening. That's it. Half an hour or an hour before. You know, don't even expect to go with them. So the issue was, I kind of was of the mindset that every single person that I would meet would be my friend regardless. Because that's how I would treat them. And, you know, of course, I had to learn the hard way that that wasn't necessarily the case. And of course, that was a bit hard-hitting because, you know, I was like, oh, well, am I doing something wrong? Like, you know, why isn't this the case? And of course, you know, my mother said to me, Charlie, you know, these people, they're only going to be your Saturday night friends. Certain people are going to be your Saturday night friends only. Don't try too hard with certain people. Don't try to be friends with them too much. And, you know, obviously, kind of being a young person, I kind of just sort of didn't really take that in. I didn't really understand that at all. But I kind of, as I've gotten a little bit older, I definitely kind of see that now. And I kind of see, like, obviously why she says that. And so that's kind of one thing I kind of really wanted to kind of say, because it can sort of affect your personal life in a bad way as well. Because you're essentially comparing yourself or proving yourself to people who aren't really respecting you in the same way. So your brain is essentially telling you to better yourself for someone who doesn't really care. And, you know, kind of, it's easy to fall into a cycle of this. And, you know, that's essentially what happened with me to some extent. And, you know, everyone has this, like, you know, I've spoken to many people who have the exact same experience as well. They've, you know, mentioned things that I completely personally relate to. And I'm not saying that, you know, either me or any other person is completely innocent in, you know, in any way. But essentially, when you're sort of someone who kind of cares a lot, and you're giving a lot of emotional investment into, like, especially in these places, you will often find that it might become a bit one-sided. So, you know, and, you know, you could argue that about sort of, you know, buying drinks for people and everything and things like that. And once you realize that once you're giving more on an emotional level, other people are not going to see that in the same way. So that was a learning curve for me. And also you have to understand that everyone is faking it. Like, I mean, at least 70-80% of people are faking it. Like, I can't even begin to fathom. Either, like, for example, they're spending all their money, and I fell into this trap as well. Either spending all their money to wear designer for that, just to be seen in that, or they're wearing the fake one. And, you know, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with, you know, buying these things or wanting to, you know, walk around these things. There's nothing objectively wrong with that. But you have to understand that in an environment like the club, it's all kind of concentrated inside that. And then don't give emotional investment into that as well. And also another thing you'll see is one rule for me and another rule for them. One rule for you and another rule for them. That's just how it is. You know, it's very hierarchical. There's lots of precedents set as well. And of course that's one thing that you do need to kind of be aware of. So this kind of ties into the fact that if you do want to go out, you need to go out for a reason. Don't fall into the trap of just going out constantly, because that's not, it doesn't really make sense. You're not really gonna have a better time or like be happier from doing that. You kind of need to fill up your own kind of physical and emotional cup before you fill up someone else's. And don't get me wrong. Like I've had times where I've been treated beyond imagination. very, very many times as well, and I'll be eternally grateful for that. But at the same time, just like at the same time, someone who has a lot of money can spend that easily, but if they're still not respecting you on the friendship level or as a friend, then what's the point, right? And like in by that same degree, by that same token, by and large, anybody can spend money on you, but if they're not respecting you, then what's the point? And this is kind of something that you'll realize when you go to these places. Of course, like I can only speak from, so for example, these are sort of places in London. I've been to, places in Hong Kong, America, India, Singapore, and of course it'll be slightly different depending on the setup and the sort of place it'll be. But don't try to don't take it as gospel that that's who I want to be friends with, that's who I want to be with, Another thing that I've learned is that there'll be a lot of sort of cliquey friend groups with a lot of agendas. And of course, when I just started going to these places, I essentially assumed that they knew it all and they kind of had everything correctly and everything like that. And so kind of as a result of that, I tried to start, essentially kind of thought, okay, fine, it would be cool to be friends with certain people. And then I quickly realized that, oh, okay, that's definitely not the case. I definitely don't want to be friends with them. And, you have to sort of be yourself and have more respect for yourself before you go trying to, I would say, either, sort of trying to get it or chase it from other people. This is what I didn't really obviously realize at the start. And of course now in hindsight, of course I now I know that maybe shouldn't have tried so hard with certain people. And there's nothing like, they're not bad people who go to these places, nothing like wrong with them per se, but there's no point trying to invest so much into someone who's not going to give it back. And kind of one thing I've noticed is that if you like look, one kind of sort of semi kind of rule of thumb that I've learned from this is see who's going to meet up with you after the Sunday afternoon afterwards. Like, yeah, I know everyone's hungover, but still, who's actually going to make that effort? Or at least the Sunday evening. Who's actually going to do that for you? Because oftentimes, they'll just message you and see if that's Saturday night, and that's it. That's not, that's not really not ideal. So essentially, when you go in, you have the security who have everyone's, so like this is how it's set up. So you have the security who have their guest list and who have, who's coming in. And then of course you have the people who aren't on the guest list who have to sort of struggle to get in a bit more. You have the people who are paying in a lot of money who just walk in. Then of course you have the people who know the management or know the owners who just walk in straight away. So there's always going to be that kind of precedent there, even though that's not really meant to happen. That's just how it's always been. That's how it's always going to be. And so, then once that happens is when you go in, you have to essentially understand that most people there are in there for the wrong reason. They're there for the sake of being there. And you could argue that, okay, fine, but then technically isn't everyone just going to a place for the sake of going there? And that's true. But then, some people do take it a bit too far. And, that doesn't mean you need to sort of be friends with them or emotionally invested in them. These are, it's a big kind of box of just kind of pretentiousness, essentially. And I'm not saying, it's always going to be like that, or it's always going to be perfect, or it's always going to be bad. But you have to sort of kind of filter yourself before you kind of go trying to be friends with certain people. Because most likely you're just going to be let down in one way or another. I was judged for not being a member of a certain club, and that kind of ruined the friendship and everything like that. And that's all those things like that. So that's something that I've kind of learned and kind of sort of learned the hard way from going to these places. I would say that there's no point trying to, especially if you're sort of, I'd say, kind of financially struggling, or there's no point for you going there. There's no reason to be going there and spending most of your paycheck on that one evening. And you have to sort of kind of, if you are going to go as a group, make sure that you guys agree on what's going to happen and what's going to be ordered. So oftentimes I've been with groups and there's been no kind of discussion about this, then the bill ends up being much more than anybody thought. And then of course it ends up being, on the person who booked it, who ends up having to pay it or something like that. And that sometimes was me. So, of course, in hindsight, that could have been avoided, but you kind of need to make sure you know what's going to happen. And if somebody wants to go and get something themselves, they can get that, but that's their situation. Make sure essentially the entire first mandate is done, and then anybody else who wants to go do something other than that, they can do. So that's kind of what I've learned from being in these places. It's a very kind of dichotomous atmosphere. There's one group of people, one person with one agenda, there's one with another agenda, and the mistake I made was I kind of thought that everyone was kind of rowing in the same boat. I know that's not, obviously now I look back on it, that was a completely unrealistic thing to think, but that's kind of that's the thinking that I had before I went into these places. And don't get me wrong, like that's I think a learning curve, and that's all of us. We're all on a learning curve right now. Other people will have their frustrations and their issues with certain things as well. This is what I've experienced myself. But I would say that also, just don't be so emotionally invested or expect others to be emotionally invested in any case, in any part of life than you, and especially in these establishments. Because I've had some times where I've been very emotionally invested and other people have been just the same. But of course that's 2 or 3 in 100 times. Most of the time people are going there, for the wrong reasons, to fake it. They're just going there very pretentiously. They're not going to be a sort of invested friend with you. People will say, people might do a bait and switch, say one thing and then do another, or vice versa. And it's not worth you putting in so much effort for that. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, also, for example, when like bottles are ordered, for example, oftentimes you never know, somebody can take a story of another table, or, sometimes some of them might have got something free. Or oftentimes somebody will say that they paid for it and they didn't, and then this entire thing starts going. Like, when you do go, don't let the environment change you as a person. So this is kind of one thing that I carried from school, is that everyone else, they let the environment almost completely change them. Almost everyone. I can't say that was everyone, but kind of almost all of the people that in my year that I went to school with, they all completely let the environment change them, and that's just what they did. And then of course I kind of saw a kind of big kind of difference in that, because I was the one that wasn't doing that, and I was getting essentially berated for it. So and there's the exact same thing when you leave school and you go to these places. When you go to college or university, when you even move to, when you get into a friend group or move to a new city or something, be yourself. Don't try to be like anybody else. It's not worth it, because half the time they're faking it. Most of the time, they don't even like themselves as people. They're happy to sort of, embellish certain things about themselves. They're happy to, essentially, maybe even not say the truth about it. But just kind of have respect for yourself and be yourself, especially when it comes to these places, and you'll find that the right people will come and the right people will go. Don't try to force. Essentially, this comes for life as well. Don't try to force kind of friendships or relationships as well. You never know what page the other person is on, what their agenda for the day is or the evening is, and don't go in with any expectations at all. It's the best nights I've had are the ones I've had no expectations at all. And sometimes I was like, okay, fine, this is gonna be a good evening. This. Gone in, spent a bunch of money, and I was like, oh, why did I do that? I could have just stayed in bed that day. So, do that. Just keep yourself to yourself. Have fun. Go out, have fun, socialize. Don't take everyone too seriously. That's definitely not worth it. Don't be so emotionally invested. Try to sort of figure out, who's worth being a friend with and who isn't. And, just kind of be yourself and have fun, really. It's not worth, you don't have to be friends with everyone. You don't have to prove yourself to everyone. You know, they might not do the same for you, so why do you have to do that for them? And even if, you know, that's on them, that's not on you. You know, that's their issue, quite frankly. You know, and that's you know, if that works for them, that works for them. But I'm not going to try and change them. I'm not going to sort of change myself just because it's fashionable to be like them. That's not something that I'm going to do ever. And yeah, so just do that. You know, don't even, I mean, of course, you know, just kind of evaluate who it's worth going with as well. You know, you're going to meet all sorts of people from all different walks of life. You know, I've you know, met people with a complete opposite situation to me. You know, complete, you know, opposite ends of the spectrum, opposite ways of looking at life, or this, that, and it's good to kind of bounce ideas off, but fundamentally, don't let that place change you ever. You know, there's definitely sort of, you know, and don't let the sort of hierarchical situation get to you as well. So, you know, and don't kind of, you know, that's just enjoy what you bring and, you know, where you go and the friends that you are with. Don't be kind of, you know, one mistake often people make is that they're kind of, you know, thinking about something else instead of just being present. There's no point in doing that. Just be present in the moment straight away. That's the only thing you can do, and that's the only thing you should do. You're setting yourself up for really failure in many different ways if you're not doing that. And that's you know, that's something that I'm learning as well. I'm definitely much better at it than I used to be. But that's, you know, just be present, be with the people that you're with, and be where you are, you know. Don't ever let that down, you know, and just kind of, yeah, just continue with that essentially.